we've been working throughout this recess, the members of the committee as well as our staff, getting additional information. Another thing that we've been working on is, the committee's charge is not just to find all the facts and lay them out, but also to come up with potential recommendations for legislative changes or administrative changes. We're also working on that.
The January 6th committee is busy gathering testimony from Trump cabinet officials ahead of more primetime hearings set to resume in the coming weeks. Tuesday, the committee interviewed Robert O'Brien, Trump's former national security advisor, about cabinet discussions on whether to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Donald Trump from office. Committee Chair Benny Thompson says investigators have spoken to, quote, pretty much every senior person in the cabinet, and for the most part, they've all indicated a willingness to talk to the committee. Joining me now is Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, Vice Chair of the Judiciary and Financial Committees and former House Impeachment Manager. Welcome, Congresswoman. Before we get into the January 6th discussion, what's your reaction to what we're learning about the documents that were recovered from Mar-a-Lago?
Well, good morning, Michael. It's a real privilege to be on with you, so thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
I have to tell you, unlike your other two guests, I did print out the whole thing. I'm a creature of paper. I know I put my printer at risk, but it is worth a read for what is there, the probable cause, the very thoughtful argument toward probable cause, of course, the identification of the documents, and of course, for what is not there. So it's extraordinarily troubling what this president was capable of, is capable of. There's so much more we need to learn. But of course, the thought that he has put our national security and those who serve to protect us at such risk is extraordinary. It was just about 6 years ago this month that then candidate Donald Trump was entitled to his first national security briefing. And I remember I, along with many others, worried, oh, my goodness, what would he do with such information? So it's a set of worries, a set of ironies. The person who wouldn't reveal his own tax return now says he's declassified everything. It's extraordinary, the real subversion by this former president of the rule of law, of the protection of our most important classified national security secrets.
Let's turn to the work of the January 6th committee, which is preparing for more hearings next month. Here's what Congressman Jamie Raskin had to say this week.
The interesting thing is that the more people come and tell the truth in sworn testimony, the more other people are willing to have the same kind of courage. So we still have a lot of people left to talk to, and that's that's what conceivably could throw a monkey wrench into tying everything up in September.
So, Congresswoman, what are you hoping to hear when the hearings resume, and what do you think the public still needs to know that hasn't come to light so far?
Well, the words and observations of these folks who are coming forward, who were very close to the president and his work and the malice nature with which he operated. I talked to Jamie this week, and I agree with him. More and more people are coming forward and talking at the highest levels. You saw how some of the lower level folks within either election systems or the White House spoke, but now they are talking to even higher level folks. I was thinking back on the closing argument in impeachment 1, where Adam Schiff argues, if right and truth don't matter, then we are lost. The work of the 1-6 committee gives me such hope that right and truth still matter. And so I look forward to their continuing their work and citizens coming forward to tell the truth to protect our democracy.
So, Congressman, I want to get your reaction to a committee member, Pete Aguilar, who talk about the hearings and the recent conversations with Trump cabinet members. Let's take a listen.
I think that we can anticipate a few more hearings, specifically on, the time period after January 6th, what was going on in the Trump White House, between the period of January 6th and January 20th. We think that a conversation related to the 25th Amendment and the conversations that cabinet secretaries and other members of his staff were having are informative to talk about the state of play and the president's state of mind at the time.
What is your reaction to that?
Well, I'll tell you my reaction through the lens of this week. I had a town hall, an in-person town hall in Collegeville, Pennsylvania, in my district. And also we did a phone survey. And what we heard and what we saw was that people really want to know, get to the truth of what happened here. And the 25th Amendment was certainly something that is important to discuss. Things were unraveling so grievously in this White House that, of course, there had to be conversations around invoking the 25th Amendment. Sadly, we saw secretaries either resign within minutes of the January 6th attack or just quietly leave rather than in doing their duty and coming together to say, is this actually what is required at this moment? But again, we'll wait for January 6th committee and other investigations to reveal the truth of that. But think of how far we've come. I'm looking at these films of January the 6th. What a spiral down that this corrupt president took us. He sought not only to flout the rule of law, he cared nothing for it. He sought to subvert it, to retain power, and of course led us to the violence of January 6th. We must hold this president to account, whether it's through the Department of Justice or state courts, and we have to encourage everybody to stay away from the violent ends. After all, violence is just the last resort of those who are incompetent. This former president is extraordinarily incompetent, and so we must be warned against violence to pursue his pursuit of power.
Representative Madeleine Dean, thank you so much for taking time to be with us on the Sunday Show. Appreciate you. Up next, Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Representative Pramila Jayapal, stops by the Sunday Show to discuss how President Biden's big plan for student debt could energize voters ahead of November. We'll be right back.